let's talk about what's so great about this weird mess. All-in-one facings for sleeveless garments are amazing. They eliminate the hassle of separate armhole and neckline facings, and that means that they stay put and never flip to the outside of your garment. In my previous all-in-one facing tutorial, we covered them for dresses with a center back zipper. But what about sleeveless garments that have no closures in the neckline, like this classic pull-on top? There's a different technique for them. It's a weird but easy little trick, but still with no hand sewing involved. I'm talking about the burrito method. I'll walk you through creating your own all-in-one facing pieces if your pattern has separate armhole and neckline facings, and then we'll assemble it all step by step with this unique method. You'll just need a sleeveless pattern, like for a top or a dress, that has no closures in the neckline. Now, my vintage top pattern came with all-in-one facing pieces, but we'll be using an all machine finish construction, whereas my pattern calls for you to slip stitch part of the armhole closed. If your pattern has separate armhole and neckline facings, here's how to draft your own all-in-one facing pieces. But if you already have all-in-one facing pieces, jump ahead to the timestamp on the screen to start assembling things. We'll start with the front bodice. To make our all-in-one facing pieces, I'm laying my tracing paper on top, and I'll first trace the entire neckline and shoulder edges and back down the arm side or armhole edge. Now we need to draw a mark to indicate the bottom edge of the facing piece, which will be how deep we want our facing. If I'm drafting this myself, like now, I tend to go about 3 inches or so deep, but you can do whatever you want. So make a mark at your preferred depth at the side seam, and the same depth at the center front. It doesn't actually have to be exactly the same, but I tend to do it that way. And one more mark now. We'll just make a mark from around the armhole notch, diagonally out towards the center of the bodice. It doesn't have to be exact. And make one more mark there. No need to be exactly precise about this. You'll see in a minute. Now we're going to draw a line down from the side seam to our marking and from the center front down to our marking. Now we just need a gentle curve down from the center front back to the armhole. Feel free to get precise with a French curve, but I pretty much just eyeball this exactly like this, using a pencil first just to make sure, and this is why I add that third mark. I'm just kind of eyeballing how to connect the dots here. Before we cut this out, don't forget your markings like grain line and notches and the center front line, and then we'll cut this out and this will be our front facing piece. The last step is you always want your facing to be just a little bit smaller than the garment at the neckline edge and the armhole edge. It just helps to get things to roll towards the inside a little bit. So cut about 1/8 of an inch off just the armhole and the neckline edges. And our front facing is done. And the back all-in-one facing piece will be drafted exactly the same way with one possible exception. If your back piece has a back neckline dart, which some patterns do, particularly vintage ones like this one, you don't want the dart in your back facing piece. And neckline darts are so tiny, so here's how I handle that. Before I trace, I just fold the dart in as it will be sewn, and I trace the neckline edge right over that. You can see me doing that here from this clip from my tutorial on all-in-one facings for dresses with a center back zipper, which has its own unique construction method. Otherwise, tracing the back facing will be the same as tracing the front facing. And don't forget to trim down about 1/8 of an inch on the neckline and armhole edges at the end. So our back and front all-in-one facing pieces are done. Take one last look at this lower edge, which will be the hem on your facing pieces, and see if you're happy with the shape. I may just take a little bit more of a scoop out of my front facing piece here. You can change the shape of this lower edge pretty much however you'd like. Some people prefer it much more scooped out towards the base of the armpit, or a little bit shorter at the side seam. You'll have to see what you like best. The important thing is that the side seam on both the front and the back pieces are the same length, so they match up when you sew. Now cut out your fabric and interface your all-in-one facing pieces. Be sure to stay stitch both the neckline and armhole edges of your bodice pieces too. Before you begin assembling, you should do 2 more things here. Finish the raw lower edge of your facing pieces to get that out of the way. I did a narrow hem here. And if your bodice has any darts to sew or anything else that your pattern may have you set up before you sew the shoulder seams, finish that now too. So now we'll assemble. For this construction trick, the first seams you need to sew are the front and back shoulder seams of your bodice and the front and back shoulder seams of your facing pieces. Press those seams open after sewing and trim and grade the seam allowances like normal. So the facing seam allowances will be narrower than the bodice seam allowances. So here's our bodice with the shoulder sewed and our all-in-one facing with the shoulder sewed. Next, we'll sew them together at the neckline. So pin your facing unit to your bodice unit at the neckline only and sew this seam. And make sure to check any notches so you don't accidentally have the back to the front. With my pattern, they look kind of similar. Sew the neckline seam and trim and grade the seam allowances. Be sure to also clip the curves. Next, we'll understitch the neckline. With the seam allowances towards the facing, just stitch around the neckline on the facing side, just a little bit away from the neckline seam. This helps to keep the facing rolled towards the inside of the garment and looking good even after the laundry. Then press the neckline after understitching. After sewing the neckline, lay your bodice out flat like this with the wrong side of the garment fabric up. The facing will be on top, and you'll be looking at the right side of the facing fabrics. And the wrong side of the facing and the garment will be together like this. The only thing attached right now is the neckline. And now for a weird and fun construction trick. I'm going to give this a 90-degree turn so that my arms aren't in the way and you can see what I'm doing. From one side at the side seam, and it doesn't matter which side you start with, take both the garment and facing fabrics together and start rolling it pretty tightly towards the other armhole. When you reach the other armhole edge, stop here. So now I'm at the other armhole edge. What we're going to do is basically, I have to hold this so I can try and show this to you. Flip the facing out around this rolled up bodice, enclosing the bodice with it, and meeting up with it on the other side with the bodice armhole edge, and then we'll be able to sew that seam. So while you're still keeping this fabric rolled up, take the facing, and just the facing here, and carefully flip this over like this. So now you can see I have the armhole edge of the garment here and the armhole edge of the facing here. And I still have my fabric rolled up underneath my hands. And now we're just going to carefully, holding that rolled up bodice, flip all of this to the opposite side, just like that. So I'm holding my rolled up bodice here. I have my facing flipped out here, and now my armhole edge, I can carefully bring it over to meet my facing armhole edge, just like that. And now we're set up to pin and sew this armhole seam. All the rest of the bodice is still rolled up here out of the way, and just make sure when you're pinning that that bodice stays tucked away from the seam line so you don't accidentally pin it into it. So we're just going to pin this seam. And give the bodice a little push out of the way if you need to make sure that you don't accidentally pin into the bodice. And here we go. The armhole will look like this once you've pinned it, with that bodice still rolled up inside between. Now we're just going to sew this seam, and then the same as we did for the neckline, we'll press it and trim and grade the seam allowances and clip the curves. So this first armhole is sewed and finished here, and I'm going to flip this over. We want the facing on top facing you. And now we're ready to get this all to the right side again. All you have to do is hold one side of the facing in the bodice, not the rolled up part, but the flat part, and with the other hand on the opposite side, give the rolled up part a tug and pull the whole thing through the shoulder seam. Eventually when you get to about here, you will have to let go and then just keep on pulling until you pull that free out to the other side, just like that. And this can be more or less difficult depending on how wide your shoulder area is and how thick your fabric is. So the first part of this trick is done. So you can see our first armhole is sewed and our second armhole is still free, and we're going to sew that next. Don't worry about understitching or pressing yet. We'll do that after we finish the second armhole. Now we'll just do the trick one more time for that second armhole that's not finished yet. Again, you want your bodice laying open with the wrong side up, and you're looking at the facing towards you. Starting at the first armhole that we've just sewed, begin rolling up the bodice again tightly towards the unfinished second armhole. Again, once you're at the opposite side, we're going to stop here and we're going to flip the facing over the rolled up bodice, carefully holding your rolled up fabric there, just like this. So we have our second armhole edge here of our bodice and our second armhole edge of our facing here. And we're just going to flip this over carefully, just like that. And now here is our facing on that side and our bodice on this side. And we're just going to bring our bodice over to the facing at this armhole seam again. And again, making sure to tuck that bodice fabric out of the way because we're about to pin this and we don't want to get any of that stuck in our pins and sewed into our seam when we sew this next. So now we're ready to go ahead and pin the second armhole and then sew this one exactly like we did for the first armhole. And this armhole is now pinned. I've made sure that I don't have any of the rolled up bodice caught in my pins so that I don't catch it when I sew. And I can sew this seam. And then just like we did for the first armhole, we will trim and grade the seam allowances and clip the curves. And the second armhole is finished. And here's what it looks like from both sides. So now we'll just pull the bodice through the shoulder exactly like we did for the first side. So you want the bodice right side up, wrong side of the facing looking at you. Grab a hold on one side as you begin to pull through the other side. And just pull that all the way through to the right side. And there we go. And now our all-in-one facing is completely attached, and all we need to do is understitch both armholes and then give everything a good press and we can finish sewing our garment. You'll need to do the understitching in 2 passes, one for the front and one for the back, since the shoulder being closed up prevents you from doing it all in one go like we did for the neckline. So you'll understitch as far as you can from the side seam up towards the shoulder as far as you're able to get, and then from the other side seam up towards the shoulder as far as you're able to get on both armholes of the garment. Understitching an armhole is usually easier inside out, but with the whole bodice rolled up in the way earlier, you can't really do it then, so just go as far as you can towards the shoulder. And press everything, since it'll be a little mangled from all the handling. And now here's our completed all-in-one facing. I was able to understitch to about here on each shoulder. And now all that's left is sewing our side seams. With the bodice right sides together, flip the facings open. We'll pin from the facing to the bottom, and then we'll sew this side seam all in one go. This construction finishes the facing and bodice side seams together. Sew both side seams like this, and then finish the seam allowances however you'd prefer. Last step is just tack down your facings at the side seams, which you can do by hand or a little stitch in the ditch on the sewing machine. And then just finish the rest of your garment. You can even use this technique for a lined sleeveless garment and for sleeveless dresses that have a side zipper or have no waistline seam at all. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give the video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Check out one of these 2 videos, and I'll see you again soon with more vintage sewing.